Hi, everybody. Welcome to City Club Missoula's December Forum, Behind the Scenes with John and Joe, an inside look into entertainment television production. My name is Brett Rosenberg, and I have the privilege of serving as chair of the City Club Missoula's Board of Directors, and I'm so happy to see so many people here with us today. City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when we discuss challenging issues like we're going to today. Before our introduction, some thank yous. Thank you to Missoula Community Access Television, which records our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190, and occasionally live streams our forums on its local live platform as well. You can also find videos of past City Club forums by clicking on the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thank you to our sponsors, in particular those at the executive level. Those are the University of Montana, Blackfoot Communications, and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand audience access and reliably plan and conduct our forums. We're grateful to all of our sponsors at all levels, and we invite you to join them by going to our website. And of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, who is, I think, in the Caribbean right now, not helping at all. City Club Missoula would also like to acknowledge that we are on the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Today, we honor the path they have always shown in caring for this place for the generations to come. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We don't have an official moderator except for me. I'll introduce our guests, who will then have what I hope is a fun and animated conversation for about a half hour or so. Afterwards, we'll have our usual table talk, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So, the recognized and prolific television production designers John Schaffner and Joe Stewart have left an indelible mark on the history of television. The programs they have designed are for the many genres of multi-camera entertainment: talk, cooking, game, award, telethons, specials, music and variety, televised events, as well as theatrical productions. I'll leave it to John and Joe to delve into their extensive list of popular productions and awards. It's too many for me to name, given the time we have. Suffice it to say, it's a lot. And in addition to their Hollywood experience, they support scholarships in fine arts study at the University of Montana, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Louisiana, and they mentor young designers as they gain their footholds in the world of entertainment design. And today, they're here to share their story with us. So I welcome them to the stage, John and Joe. Come on up.
Wow, thank you. We thought we'd show you a short video to get your attention. Lights, action, play, roll 'em. It's coming. Quiet on the set!
I just want to be married again. And I just want $1 million.
But I know I can set it. All the lights, the orchestra, a big production like that.
Oh, so many beauty pageant girls, I'm telling you. We did this video about 2013, I think, for when I was getting a PhD. So it's a little bit behind the times, and we have some more work, but it'll come later on in another edit. So there.
So the common question is, well, first of all, introducing myself for shortly, I was born and raised here and attended the University of Montana and got my bachelor's degree in theater with an emphasis in scenery and costume and lighting design. And then, of course, like young people in the 70s, I got out of here as soon as I could and went to Pittsburgh and to Carnegie Mellon University for my master's degree in theater, and that's when I met Joe.
I'm from Louisiana. I'm from southwestern Louisiana. My dad was in the oil business. And so I grew up down there, studied art history and architecture, and then decided, well, it wasn't going to be what I was going to do. So I went to Carnegie Mellon to study theatrical design. That's where I met John.
So we started out there, and we ended up in New York for a while after Joe graduated. I did a season at the Seattle Rep as a #2 guy there, and New York was good to us, but we discovered there that we were working in some recorded entertainment for public television in particular, single camera mostly, and we thought, well, you know what, before it's too late, we bought a 1965 Thunderbird convertible in Brooklyn and drove to Hollywood. So it was the same exact model and color as Thelma and Louise, but not the same car, and we were there first. So we got to Hollywood, and two things that I want to talk about. First is we've used the word multi-camera multiple times, and the reason is basically even though in the old days they used to call it movies or television, but those are really antiquated words in some respect. The real difference is in how you record the entertainment and the kind of entertainment. So multi-camera entertainment is often in front of a live audience and often and with multiple cameras. A standard sitcom, people used to call them 3-camera because that's what Desi Arnaz and Lucy came up with when they were doing I Love Lucy, but we use 4. But when we're doing a spectacular such as the Super Bowl
American Music
halftime,
Awards or one of those kind of shows.
it can be 12 cameras easily. So it's multiple cameras being shot. So every image and thing that you see has to be arranged and set up so that it can be shot from any direction ultimately.
Right, and that's what production design is. One aspect of production design is you have to imagine, or you have to really study, what are the backgrounds going to be from each camera angle.
But
so a lot of times you consult with the director about where the cameras are going to go in the theater and how the cameras are going to be used to move through the space.
So it is very much like doing a live show, even though it's being recorded.
Absolutely.
As opposed to single camera, which is what you see when you see a feature or, quote, a movie, a motion picture. I hesitate to use the word film anymore because I think only Steven Spielberg records on film. It's shot with one camera, maybe a couple, but they set up each shot individually. So if we were in multi-camera, if we were shooting this group sitting here, we would have 4 cameras here, one with the wide shot, 2 or 3 that would then pick up who was talking, and then it would be edited later or edited on site. Whereas single camera, we'd set the camera up and you'd do the whole luncheon with one camera, and then we would turn that off and move it over to here and turn it back on again and then watch Sandy eating. and then we'd move the camera over to here, and we'd shoot Stephen, and that way, and then we'd take all that back, and we'd cut it all up and make one story.
But
So that's
also-
the difference between multi and single.
And there's also another aspect to that. In multi-camera, all of the lighting has to be up in the air so that the cameras are free to move and record the images. Whereas in a feature film or single camera work, you can light individually so that you can look fabulous.
You make that adjustment. You tell the person in the background, turn a little more that way. Oh, move the sconce down a little bit. Well, that rose is sticking out of her head, which is a common phrase. Move it over there a little bit. So you have that finessing of each shot. Where multi-camera, sometimes you kind of go like, well, that's as good as we're going
That's
to get.
what you're going to get. This is it.
But then, so multi-single. So then the question is, what is a production designer? And I've used the term and tried to describe it most simply as we're the lucky people who get to read a script or have that first meeting and start to imagine what it's supposed to look like when it's a finished product on the screen. What is the picture? And how does that picture support the story? Whether it is a beauty pageant, in which case you're trying to achieve kinds of things that Joe can talk about more, or something that's scripted, or a game show, or the personality of a talk show.
I would say a talk show, like you saw a little snippet of Rachel Ray there, but her introduction to daytime television, they wanted to make kind of a statement. And in that particular set, the audience was on a turntable, and it would turn to different areas of the set to look. But we were they wanted to separate Rachel from Ellen and from Oprah at the time, and so she had we had color and form and all of the things that were going to be defined as Rachel Ray. Now, she's moved on. She's in a different set than what we showed, but it still is true. When the personality is trying to get defined in the television landscape, what does it look like?
So I would say, like, when we did Ellen, we did the set for Ellen that she used for the first 3 years, and then they called and said, we need a new set. We're moving to Warner Brothers. And we said, well, why didn't you call us in June? It's August, and you want it by when? So we had to say, no, thank you. But anyway, Ellen, it's all true, by the way. She actually used to live next door to us. About the only time she came over to visit was she banged on the door and said, hey, I got to get rid of my dining room table. I need you to buy it because I don't like it anymore.
Hi, how are you?
I saw her later at an Emmys, and I said, don't you remember we lived next door to you for years? And she said, no. So anyway, the talk show, we loved our work with Conan, though. He was brilliant, and we loved working with Conan both on The Tonight Show.
The nicest man on earth.
Truly, just a gift. Just a gift. So, yeah, we thought we'd split off a little bit here, and Joe talk a little bit about the work in like weird shows like the American Music Awards and Variety.
Well, because and then John can tell you about sitcoms. The thing with variety shows is it's very old-fashioned. It's almost like vaudeville in that most of the things that I did were live, and so you would have to change out the stage. We came from from the mighty stage that has flying mechanisms and all of that kind of stuff, and you try to make it look very modern. I did the American Music Awards for about 20 cycles, and it's a lot about pleasing performers that they need to have
19 music acts.
Yeah,
each
usually
one
19
in their own
acts
set.
a show, and getting them moved off and on the stage. We have a funny story about Mariah Carey, because everybody talks about her now because of that Christmas song. But she was going to open the show. Now, Mariah is fabulous, but she's kind of a lot to deal with. And what she wanted,
she's a very, very hard worker.
and she worked so hard. And what she wanted to do, she was making an entrance behind. There was
Inside a giant mirror ball.
Inside a giant mirror ball. Actually, it was a reuse of the tennis ball that we used on Victoria's Secret, and it was covered in mirrors. So you remodel in scenery all the time. And the inside of it, she was going to appear.
We don't have a warehouse.
Oh, she was going to appear. And the thing she wanted to do was not really sit because it was hard to get up in her heels. She just wanted to kind of slide off of a shelf. And so she wasn't sure how high the shelf should be.
More gracefully than Joe just now.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was that we finally couldn't figure it out. We say this high, this high, this high. She said no. So we had to go to her house
At midnight.
at midnight because she was only available. And then she wasn't really available at midnight. She didn't really show till 12:30.
Sweatpants and high heels.
And measure her butt. And so, so what we had to do was see how far we had to make the shelf. And so we went around to every little piece of furniture in her house, and she'd do the move and see if it would work. And so, you know, you never know where design is going to bring you. Anyway, we got it done. We got it done. And it was really fun. She was at the last minute getting sewn into her dress, running onto the stage to get into the mirror ball and making everybody crazy. But
One thing that was amazing, we had the good fortune of working with Dick Clark as one of his primary designers for many years, and watching the young talent grow up on the shows. J-Lo, when she first showed up, was kind of a very nervous young woman. We had that Eiffel Tower we had to build for her, and she came down in an elevator, and she was so anxious that her J-Lo was how she wanted to be referred to as. So at the last minute, just before the show was starting, counting down 10, and I'm out on the stage rubbing J-Lo letters on top of the elevator door so that she could be J-Lo. But now they grow up, you know.
And then, well, that's the way about variety, is you're always kind of trying to please the performers in the show because, of course, everybody wants to wear the red dress. Everybody wants to be what the press talks about. And so, you know, it becomes a panic to get the show on. But once they start the show, it's calm because everything is going. The train is leaving the station, and, you know, what happens, happens. One time, I was going to tell you at the Emmys, when the audience was collapsing, we had done this set. Well, it really wasn't collapsing. It wasn't collapsing. But what had happened was that we had done this set, and there was an audience on the side, and The Sopranos was a big show at the time, and they were, you know, very large people anyway. And they were jumping up and down, and one of the 2x4s had a knot in it, and so it broke at that 2x4. So it wasn't going to fall down, but the floor was softening a little bit because the plywood was kind of bouncing around. And one of the stage managers, who was sort of an alarmist, ran out to the construction coordinator who was backstage and me and said, the audience is collapsing. And it was like, oh my God. So we went underneath with flashlights and saw what the problem was. And we had a saw set up backstage. So every time
at commercials
or applause, we'd turn on the saw and cut. And the producer is a live producer. He's sitting backstage at a table and going, Jesus, what is that saw on for?
But Dick Clark was really smart. You know, he'd say to someone like, you know, a young person entering the business like Pink, and he would tell them, now, you be sure and save your money, because you might have a hit now, but you might not have another one.
He was very fatherly.
He was very good at that, you know.
Anyway, you should talk about sitcoms.
Yeah, we got to watch our time here. Yeah, comedy came light in life, shall we say.
Yeah.
When we first moved to L.A., of course, you know, careers sometimes happen because of opportunities, not because you're going exactly in this direction. You see, this is where I'm going that way. As you're going that way, and then you go like, oh, look, I got this job here I could do. And then, you know, so it's a wavering experience. So I got this job working for a designer, Ed Stevenson, and I became his set decorator. The set decorator is like, as a production designer, my right-hand person, because that is the you work with who goes out and shops and selects and buys and furnishes the set. So I got a job with Ed and did Benson and Soap and some other series, and then the last thing I decorated was the pilot to the Golden Girls. So the sofa, as I like to say, was my fault. But I walked away from that because I had this opportunity to work with a company, Bob Banner Associates. Bob started his career with Kukla Klan and Ollie and as a director, and then he directed the Today Show before it was the Today Show, and then he became the producer of the Gary Moore Show, and then he discovered Carol Burnett and put her on the show, and then he brought her to Hollywood, and then he got her a TV show. So his company was a medium-sized entertainment company, and I met them doing a Perry Como. Does anybody know who Perry Como is?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Christmas
I
show
said that to our
in
assistant.
Colonial Williamsburg. And so when we moved west, I connected with Bob's company, and one producer in particular engaged with me, and we started developing a talent competition show, Star Search. So I named Star Search, and then I also came up with the conceptualization of how the scoring would be done. That would be like getting a grade. You get an A, B, C, D, but you'd get it by a number. So you got a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that made it simple and the audience understood. Instead of some of these newfangled talent shows where you don't understand why anybody's winning anything. So anyway, yeah, I'm that old. So Star Search and that, that's what happened when we met David Copperfield. And David called through a friend of ours, and I didn't suggested to him, and so we had a good interview, and he said, we want to hire you. And I said, well, you're going to have to hire Joe too, because I'm busy doing Star Search, and we'll do it together. And David said, oh, well, that seems like a good idea.
So
but as long as I can get a hold of you when I have a problem. I said, sure. Well, of course, David fell in love with Joe.
Well, and and the deal is, it was great working with, the world of magic, and that was all fun. And we were doing his specials and everything. And there was this one special in particular that was the Bermuda Triangle special, where we had to go to the Virgin Islands and make a ship appear in the water. And it was, oh my God, it was like the Vietnam War of television specials. It was so
Apocalypse Now of
hard.
television
the
specials.
Apocalypse Now. It was the most difficult TV special ever to do. But while we were doing that special, we made a very good friend, Mr. Kevin Bright, and he's the producer of Friends.
And so when at the age of 42, he calls us up and says, hey, I got this pilot for a sitcom. We want you guys to do it. So I did a few preliminary sketches, and we interviewed and got the job. Well, it became a hit, and now 156 pilots, 63 series, 3,010 episodes later, I quit last year. I called up my boss, Chuck Lorre. I don't know if you might have heard of him, executive producer with a certain sort of quirky reputation. And we had done, 2.5 Men and The Big Bang Theory, and I really loved working with Chuck. He was difficult, but it was worth it, always. And he said, quitter. So, I said, Chuck, I just can't. I just got to do some other things in life. At certain points, at one point, the most series I did at one time was 7. Usually I would do between 4 or 5, to keep me interested and entertained, But that's another thing about multi-camera. Multi-camera is multitasking, and you can do multiple shows, and neither the unions nor the producers have any problem with that. If you're a single camera production designer, you do one job at a time, whether it be episodic storytelling 1 hour, or whether you do long form.
And multi-camera does turn into the bread and butter of television. That
at least for us it did.
It certainly did for us. And the thing is, I was going to go backwards in time. When I worked at NBC, my first job was being an assistant on Days of Our Lives. But it was amazing to see the business end of entertainment in that regard, because it would be one day, one show. So there were 8 commercials in those days. And what would happen is, in that one day, you could generate that many commercials in the daytime lineup. So it was never lose sight of the business end of entertainment.
Yeah, they used
television.
to say daytime paid for prime time.
Yes.
But the times have changed.
Regardless. But we're getting close, John. It's about
I don't know how we're doing. Are we doing okay? Let's get to talk fast,
No, 3 more minutes.
I don't know. Anyway, we this business of multi-camera, multitasking has given us the opportunity to do lots of things that people might not think John and Joe would be doing.
And meet lots of different people.
So of course, we got to know a certain president of the United States who just happened to own the Miss Universe pageants. So we never, fortunately, had to really work for him. We worked for the production company that was producing the shows.
But I was in Moscow.
Joe was in Moscow.
I could tell you all about that experience. But regardless.
And then of course, but before that, or about equivalent to that, I don't remember what years, in the early 2000s, a friend of ours who had been a producer in New York, he'd come up through the union ranks as a stagehand, but he'd been very smart and looked ahead to wanting to be a producer, so he became the executive producer of the Radio City Music Hall Christmas Spectacular. So then we were on the West Coast, but they were deciding to go on and build a whole series of companies of this as a franchise.
As an entertainment, a franchise
So
entertainment.
we ended up doing the Radio City Music Hall Christmas Spectacular outside New York, in Branson, Chicago, Detroit, Myrtle Beach, Los Angeles.
Mexico City.
Yeah, well, no, we
Kind of.
quit just before Mexico.
yeah.
I can't do Christmas. Joe hates Christmas. Yeah, too many
Sorry.
Christmas specials. You know, I did Perry Como, Andy Williams. Joe's done Michael Bublé. What is that group that sings without acapella?
Oh, yeah, the Pentatonics.
You know, Christmas in
Let my
Disneyland.
dear little drummer boy one more time.
So then David, the producer, said one day to us, "You wouldn't would you be interested in designing the Republican National Convention?" We said, "Well, it's kind of weird for us, but, you know, we
didn't
like
think
you."
We wanted Don and Joe. But, of course, we did. We started out with Bush in Philadelphia, and then we got along, and so we did Bush in New York, and then we did McCain.
In St. Paul.
And St. Paul, then Skip for Romney, and then we were invited back to do really Jeb Bush, but it ended up being Trump.
The Republican National
It was
Committee
fascinating.
Was confirmed that Jeb Bush was going to be the candidate.
Absolutely fascinating. And you see, the thing about the project was it would start a full year and a half before the convention, because you had to schedule. Well, we didn't even talk about this, but as production designers, we do the site plan for
Those kinds of
everything.
events.
So we would say where the trucks park. We create the document that's the drawing of everything.
Well, our assistants do.
Yeah, everybody does. The assistants do. But when you move it around so that they can, and that's used to string the telephone wires and the da-da-da-da, and Andrea Mitchell's is going to sit up here. You know, it's all that kind of stuff. And it's really fun because it's such a huge thing to do. And then.
And it's interesting to being backstage during the convention and
Oh.
being
Libby
close
Dole,
in person.
it was fabulous. Libby Dole screaming at her assistant coming down the hall
Yeah, Libby was kind of,
before
yeah,
she'd go on. It was great.
she's a screamer.
I always put my office, because I was in charge of locating things, right by the entrance to the stage. So I could always hear what was going on right before they went on.
Yeah, I mean, when it was Dole McCain was making his way up the stairs, and I think his handlers took very good care that none of us really, the audience, the people, America, never really understood how challenged physically he was from his time being incarcerated in Vietnam.
Yeah, one of the things we had to do was the set, we had to adjust everything on the set to lower rises on the stairs and handrails at a certain height. All kinds of things that I don't think anybody knew, because he was so good at presenting himself that you had no idea how impaired he really was. Also, we built duplicates of the set in warehouses so that he could rehearse upon it. And the other thing that we would always duplicate, which was kind of fun, was the lectern. So that people, when they were speaking, they could have a go at it in a rehearsal hall and be on camera, so that they wouldn't be like shaking and holding onto the lectern,
Yeah, there's a couple good stories about the lectern. When Bush was in Madison Square Garden, it came up out of the floor. And so Joe was on set and showing George and Mrs. Bush the situation there.
This has to be really quick. I had to tell him, because it was a sloat, a trap door that, kind of like your sunroof. It slid back, and then the lectern would arise. But they made me do the speech that, well, it's a hydraulic. Has never broken, but it could break. So I wanted to make sure that he understood that until the lectern was up, we weren't secured, we weren't locked off. And don't keep walking down the runway blowing kisses and fall in the hole. And he said to me, he said, "It's not going to break, is it?" I said, "There will be 1,000 people trying to fix it, but it could break. And it's live. So when your speech comes up on the teleprompter, go. And you can blame me, but don't fall in the hole." He was
Yeah.
great. I liked him a lot.
So
He was
some
fabulous.
weird little moments in our life story. When in New York, I was fortunate enough to design 2 shows for Joe Papp in Central Park when I was only 25. I got the Discovered in New York thing, and I did The Taming of the Shrew with Meryl Streep and Raul Julia. And so I was on the train with Meryl and the director of the show, Wilford Leach, and Meryl turned to us and said, "I think I might end up being a movie star."
Yeah, pretend I'm the band playing off to the side.
Okay, then we're getting a play off. Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
They're not done yet. You can go somewhere else for a few minutes, but for now it's time for table talk. Table talk is a very rich part of every City Club forum, ostensibly the reason why we're all here. We'll take about 10 minutes for each table to come up with a question to ask John and Joe, who will then hopefully have a fun response. In 10 minutes, I'll come back, but for now, introduce yourselves to each other if you haven't yet, and start coming up with a question. As I said at the beginning, please keep it respectful, and please try not to make statements and keep your questions short. And if you have extra time, I'd maybe talk about what was the apocalypse now of City Club forums in the past. So think about that. Thanks. All right, everybody, it's time for questions. If we can get the mics to work. Somebody with a mic that may or may not be working will come to your table for one of your volunteers. Ready, set, go.
Hello, hello.
What about Jerry Lewis?
Okay, Jerry Lewis. What about Jerry Lewis?
Hold up a second here. We'll have this person ask the question here since you raised a hand. All right, so I'll be back. So, stand up.
My name is Paige Good, and I'm just wondering what it is about Jerry Lewis.
Okay, great. Well, I worked with Jerry for basically 23 years on the MDA telephone, as did John. We both worked together, but I would be the one that would get stuck with Jerry. And the thing is, he's fabulous. He's one of the greatest performers ever, one of the greatest comedians ever. But he falls into that category of a showbiz monster. And you never know when you say good morning who you're going to meet. And so it was one of those things that you went, oh my goodness. I had this really great experience. When we were doing the telethon, Jerry had this compound that he would live in during the 24 hours of the show. And we'd put things all together. There was a dressing room, there was a reception room, there was like a little bedroom for his child, and then there was a wardrobe area for his multiple tuxedos to put on and everything. And the way we'd start the show was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be an orchestra downbeat, and then the show would begin at 5 o'clock, and that would be the thing. And we'd eat lunch during 3 to 4 o'clock. And while we were eating lunch one time, I saw everybody's head snap up, all the security people, and they all came running at me. And they said, Jerry has to see you right now in the compound. You just go right over. So I went over, put down my fried chicken, went over to the thing, and he was mad as a wet hen. And what had happened was we had a high dressing table for him so that he could get his makeup on and everything without sitting down because he didn't want to crease his pants. And so when I walked... Yeah, for his back. But what happened was when I walked in, he was all done on the top in a tuxedo, and and the bottom wasn't finished yet, and it was underpants and garters and socks, but shoes. And so anyway, the table had fallen over because somebody had set it up high on apple boxes and they hadn't secured it, and all of his stuff was on the ground. Okay, well, he is screaming at me, and he goes, "Look at this!" And of course, I couldn't. All I started doing was laughing. I couldn't stop laughing, which didn't help the situation at all. So neither here nor there. So I told him to get out and I would fix it. And I did, and he got his pants on and he made his entrance and everything was fine. But for the rest of it, but then I said, I went up to him at the break and he said, "I told you I would fix it." And then all he said to me was, "Oh, fuck you, Joe." Too much fun.
Hey,
Hello.
thanks for being here, y'all. Bit of an open-ended question. I was just hoping y'all could speak to some of the unique challenges of working with techniques like forced perspective with multi-camera, and if you had any interesting anecdotes, around working.
I think using forced perspective is a way to make things look deeper that aren't that deep, and it's usually something that you do in drawing to create a sense of depth, if I'm reading your question correctly. But essentially, when you're making pictures and you're having a three-dimensional environment, you're trying to make look more, that's going to be on a two-dimensional TV screen or in your home, how to give it greater depth. So one of the things that we've always done is you have your foreground material so that it's closer to the camera, your midground material, and your background material. And another thing you do is sometimes you make things a little bit smaller that are in the background to give you this sense of further distance. One of those things was outside of the bedroom of Monica and Rachel's apartment's kitchen. Through the window, you saw another apartment building. So we made it a whole facade of the side of an apartment building that had miniature bricks that were like this big instead of this big, and we made miniature fire escapes that were this big instead of this big, so that it looked like it was further away. And likewise, you use sometimes, certainly now, it's become much more prevalent in multi-camera, where we were afraid of it for a long time because it was hard to control, the artificial illustrations in the background. So on Bob Hart Abishola, the producers very much wanted to give the cafeteria in the hospital to make it look much bigger. So we basically made a set with a low, green, some plants, a planter box, and so it looked like there was levels to the thing. And then we found a cafeteria at the Sony building that we could take pictures of, and so we did you can do a blue screen, which was what we did. You can do blue or green. We did blue for a process shot, and then we were able to insert in post-production the image of the much larger cafeteria behind the smaller set that we had built. This really, I think, only came about more productively and more easily, say, in the last 15 years. In the early 90s through to 2000, 2005, it was much more difficult, but it really got much better, and so there was a much greater expectation of those kinds of techniques to make multi-camera scripted material deeper and more interesting.
Okay. Hi, my name's Frank Reed. I don't have the capacity to ask a technical question, so I'm going to ask you something else. The spectrum of what you guys have done is just staggering. Just curious if there's a story about a job you wanted that you didn't get and what that might have entailed.
Well, there were some jobs that we interviewed for, and we learned our lesson about don't provide them with too much of your idea until you get hired. So one in particular, Joe did a sketch of a rooftop. It was a new series. What was it called? Which one? In Living Color. Some of you may have heard of that one. And so Joe had this idea that the show would be set on a rooftop with parts of the building that, like the water tower and, a big sign that would be on the top of the building, and left a sketch with the producers. Well, Keenan Winan, whatever his name was, well, he didn't hire us, and then that they went to the next person they did hire and said, we want it to be on a rooftop. So that kind of made us cranky. And then we did another one for Dennis Miller, who I thought would have been a lot nicer since he was just a kid on Star Search. And, you know, we went in with a whole presentation of these are our ideas about it. And, well, they didn't hire us, but they hired a designer and then did all of our ideas. So we stopped giving it away for free.
Yeah. Hi, Mike Sweet, John. So a question, we're talking about your formative years and what kind of led you on the path to theater, but we really want to reflect on whether you considered your Sentinel High School production of Brigadoon a success.
I think it was a great success because I was the co-star. I played the drunk. Well, actually, you know, I started making little sets when I was in grade school at Lewis and Clark, and then my favorite person, Margaret Johnson, became my mentor all through high school. And I walked into her, you know, classroom in the fall of 1966. Oh God, that's so long ago. And I said, well, I'd like to volunteer to do something, so I got to run the lights for The Sound of Music. I also had to go out and cut down trees to make the forest for them to climb through up the bleachers later. But, you know, I went on to a lot of work with Margaret and the high school and running to be the thespian president and the thespian treasurer over time, which in the end ended up I ran for being chairman of the Television Academy. And so one of the big stories about was once a high school drama president, always a high school drama president.
Thanks. Hi, Deborah Franson. What advice would you give to a young person maybe coming out of high school to become a production manager? Would you advise them to go the education route that you did through the master's program, or just to leave Missoula and go to New York or LA, or what advice would you give?
We lately have been giving advice to students in different, because one of the things that we didn't ever think we were going to necessarily be production designers when we were starting to study. We didn't really know that. What we kind of thought was, I'll talk about myself. Generally, I thought I just wanted to do something that had to do with the world of design. It wasn't as specific as working in television. In fact, I know that when I was watching Bewitched and The Wild Wild West and My Three Sons and all those TV shows, I never thought about that being a set. I didn't really consider that. And I know for a long time, I just don't know what I thought. Really, you know, I didn't think that Gunsmoke, that there was an exterior Western street at Warner Brothers. You know, I just, I don't know.
That was at Radford.
Radford, pardon me. But the deal was, so anyway, I would say that that students should do what they are most interested in doing. And then I think education is very important, because in that time of your life, you can spend so much time learning about things exclusively. It's a lot, but if you actually know what you're going to do, or unfortunately for poor performers, if the age is so important. You know, if you're a young person and you've got a youth market that's going to only last for so long, and then you move on.
Yeah, I think for a performer it might be a little different, but no matter what you do, you have to know your craft.
Right.
And to study a craft is very important. And to address your question, I tell anybody, stay in college as long as you can. I don't care what it costs. Make your parents sell their house. You know, sell the jewelry, whatever it takes, because of a couple of things. Your craft. This is not the kind of craft, and we lament at the Union 800 it's very, very difficult for us to reach out and be more inclusive to minority groups, because there's less opportunity for minorities in particular to have a good theater program in their school. And but you can't just jump into any of this. You have to have stagecraft. You have to study literature. You have to study the history of art and ornament. You have to study basic design. You have to study the ability, you have to know how to illustrate, draw, paint, do things, now on the computer, which takes the place of pencils. But these are serious crafts. And so if you can get a bachelor's degree in a semi-liberal arts, but with some emphasis, I recommend, unless you're at a school that's very powerful and very, oriented towards, delivering you out early. If you start with the liberal arts with some, and then you go on for a master's program, I think it's a really good thing to do in our field. Secondly, which is odd, is that the friends that we've made in both here at the university that I made here and the friends in particular that we made at Carnegie Mellon are the friends that have stood by us through our entire career and have offered us and been the part of the major network that has allowed us to get to know people, know where the jobs are. So every spring, the students from Carnegie Mellon would come to LA and we would have an event where all of the designers and technical people, we'd have a big party and invite all of the people we knew who were already in the profession as well as other alum. And then they'd go back to school. If they chose to come to LA, they'd have a list already of people that they'd met who were working professionally who could help them get jobs. So that group of people that you graduate with the year before and the year after, they really become your connections to the business in a way that if you show up cold, you don't know anybody, and it's much more difficult to get your foot in the door. Production design is a pretty small business. There are, in our local 800, there's about 1,700 art director, which used to be the #1 title, it's the #2 title, and production designers in the business. In the sitcom design business, it really, because there's so many fewer of them now, there was about, when I retired, there was about 6 of us who were doing them all. It's a very small world, and in the variety entertainment business,
About the same.
we said at the beginning, I'd say there was
variety,
about 10 to 15 people
right.
who were
that would do big shows,
who
big
were the
live
people
shows.
who everybody called. It's transitioned now that we've left the scene, but some of the people who've come up after us are assistants. Some of them have done quite well, gone sideways. Our assistant, David, is now doing Kelly Clarkson and won an Emmy for it, and we're very proud of him, and he's very excited because he's been to Montana. They talk about Montana and her place out there by Phillipsburg all the time. So anyway, so it is, I think, yes, at least get a bachelor's if you have the money and the go power. For me, it was like if I had gone from Montana to New York or LA, I would have been lost. But by going to Pittsburgh, meeting the people out there, then the next step, it was appropriate.
Easier.
I got to then the next step.
And when we moved to Los Angeles, it really was pretty much a cold call every day. We would do a cold call to try to get in places. And
but we usually had some kind of weird connection. Well, my friend so-and-so, who I think
Right.
you know, has suggested I call you about this job.
so you could at least introduce yourselves that way. And then you and your portfolio were on your own,
And you would also, we received many calls from students from all over the country. And the first call is like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And a lot of these people did not have a connection to us. And I'd say, well, that sounds great. We'd love to see your work. I just can't even look at the calendar right now. It's just the next couple of weeks are so busy. Give me a call in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, if they're smart, they call back. I say, oh, you just caught me at a really bad time. I would love to meet you. I've read your resume. You look like you're so talented. Give me a call in 2 weeks. If they call on the third time, then I make time to see them. And they'd come over and I'd interview, look at the portfolio, and we'd sit down together and I would say, okay, here are people that I think you could see. And then I would say, please use my name and you can call. Joe did the same thing. Sometimes we did it together. And we would that way forward those, help those people. And, I think that's kind of an awkward way, and we don't mean it to be negative, but sometimes a little hurdle at the beginning, you discover who really, really wants it and who is going to give up easier. And you can't give up in this business. Go ahead, shout it out.
Susan Day Patrick. Based on our conversation Saturday night, Joe, during which you correctly predicted the ending of The White Lotus, by the way, I shared our conversation with our table, and so we do want to know, what is the most transgressive thing you've ever done that you want to share with us?
I don't know. I was going to tell you that story about Jerry Lewis and his underpants, but I mean, I think that's kind of it. That wasn't really, you're pretty well behaved most of the time. I mean, and measuring her butt was also kind of, but regardless, I think most of the stuff we did, we were pretty well behaved. We didn't do too many bad things, and we didn't see too many bad
Sometimes
things.
you get awkwardly into very intimate moments sometimes with people. When they canceled The Big Bang Theory, it was kind of a surprise to the cast. It was about to be leaked, and Jim Parsons had a meeting with Chuck over the weekend and said, I'm not resigning. And Chuck had early on said, if they're not all on board, I'm not going forward. I'm not going to lose one member of this cast and try to keep the show alive. And so we had our production meeting in the morning, and then they had a table read. And during the table read, it had gotten out into the internet, and the cast became aware of it. So they sent a vehicle down to the stage and picked up the whole cast, and they rushed it all up to Chuck's office and the head of Warner Brothers, and they all met. And I kind of knew what was going on, and I walked up onto the stage, and poor Kaylee Cuoco was just sobbing hysterically, and Johnny was just there was so many tears, and then I ran into Jim afterwards, and I said, Jim, I totally understand why you've done this, but it must have been hard. He said, it was extremely hard, and I feel so bad that I've had to let everybody down, the cast, the crew, the studio, the network, but I just can't do this anymore. And I had to absolutely respect his choice in that. I mean, 12 years playing Sheldon was enough. And I think, okay, I get it. You're tired of memorizing those lines every weekend, but so sometimes as a designer, Joe had some really awkward moments with Michael Jackson, shall we say. There's one night, and so we were doing this big TV special with Michael. It was going to be HBO, the concert. And we went, it was in New York, and we took over the Beacon Theater, and we built this extremely expensive set that mirrored some of the theater, and there was a lot of things that were coming and going, and an orchestra that was stacked up to the back wall because it was a small stage. And rehearsals had started, millions of dollars had been spent, and Joe was sitting there in the audience.
And I don't think Michael ever really wanted to do the show. It was supposed to be one of these shows that was.
But I got to back up.
What?
So anyway, Joe flew to New York with the model, which was in a big, container, and another midnight call at a hotel to meet Michael.
You had to go. I was staying, of course, at the Mayfair on the other side of town, and Michael was on the east side at the Four Seasons. And of course, I had to wait until, because I was presenting the set design to him, and he was like, when are we going to do this? And of course, it was classic. It was like a rainy night in New York, and I got a phone call at 11 o'clock. He's ready. Come on over. And so, getting myself and my crate into the taxi cab and getting into the freight delivery at the Four Seasons and up to the room. And they all kind of knew I was coming. And then I went to one level, and then they said, well, he's in the other level in the suite, so we have to go up. So they led me to the door, and right at the door, when we opened, they said, the only thing is you can't look at him. I said, oh my God, okay. So I went in this room that was completely black with like a little floor lamp in the corner. And I was standing up on my hands and knees, and I had this whole big model of the Beacon Theater and lighting, things going on. And then I sort of realized, I'm not alone. There's somebody else in this room. And Michael was behind the lamp in the corner with his sunglasses on and his hat and everything. And it was like, and his mask. Yeah, everything was on. And I thought, oh my goodness. And so finally I realized, and I said, okay, Michael, come over here and look at this. And then when I'd show it to him, I'd put my glasses down and look over and look at him. And we sort of did monkey see, monkey do. It wasn't like I was looking at him, but it was the strangest presentation that I ever did. And he liked it. He liked it. And I thought, and we're off to the races. Let's go. Bob's your uncle. We're going to build it. And so, but it didn't happen that way. What happened, he never did the show. He got sick, collapsed on the stage. In rehearsal, he was doing black and white, walked out, the riff started, and then Michael fell down. And, everybody came around him, all of his people came around with and I was sitting next to the HBO executive, and he said, "Oh, I hope he goes home and gets to rest, and we're on for tomorrow." And I said, "Oh no, we're going home." So the special never, ever, ever happened. Somebody though has got rehearsal tapes somewhere, but that are kind of interesting, but I've never seen them. We got paid, which was magical. I wasn't expecting that we would, but we did. Wonderful producer.
Hello, I'm Charlie, and these have been wonderful questions. Mine's just kind of boring here, but 2 questions. Has all of the technological changes that have happened since when you started till now, have they been challenging? And if I put some dollars down, can you guys come out and just hang out with me all afternoon and tell me all these stories?
I'll take the beginning of it. The switching to HD, to high def, really is something. I mean, it completely changed the level of finish that scenery has. It is amazing how, because I always go back to Days of Our Lives, and we used to fix seams with masking tape and paint over kind of the color. And it was, because you seam, walls together in scenery. And the thing was, you got away with it. It was fine. But now, in high def, how it is that you can see a wild hair that somebody has. It's just amazing how much more specific the image is. Then, when you change to 16:9 aspect ratio from 4:3, that was another thing, because the way the picture is framed in the medium close-up is different than it was. And so it's an elongated rectangle, so compositionally, everything is a little different. And it's something. It's not impossible. It's just all part of the world of design and everything. And then, of course, in my business of beauty pageants and music shows and that kind of stuff, LED screens changed everything, because now that's almost the scenery. Is LED screens, and then you just talk about what mill it is. Is it a 2
and
mill?
then the image,
And the imagery that you put onto the LED screen, because it's changeable. I think an example of LED screens is that CBS morning show with Gayle King. The entire set is LED screens, and they constantly change per segment what the backings. Whereas if you think of the old-fashioned way that people would do it, you'd sort of be in a little swell apartment in New York or something, and sitting, you discuss it, how the interior would be, and then there might be one screen that would play back some information or the news or something, but it wouldn't be this entire room of imagery that you would be in.
I would say the one comment is that it's amazing how the audience, how we all have come to accept the higher levels of technology as, well, that's the way it should be. And they were perfectly happy with I Love Lucy, the way it looked on black and white TV. And now, every over the years, every single thing has just gotten better and better. The color, the ability of cameras to collect color, look what your phone can do. The first cameras that we worked with even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, did not like lavender. No. So, and one of the reasons purple worked on Friends was because it was shot on film. It wasn't shot with a video camera. And so then but if it was been shot with a video camera at that time, I'm not sure I could have gotten away with the purple as it was.
Yeah.
And so the ability to capture color and detail has certainly spoiled us all.
Yeah, because it's so, every time you go to Costco, you think you need to buy a new TV.
Either that or get a facelift
wow,
and
that looks good.
Implants and yeah.
What's your next act?
Well, we're looking forward to doing more travel and living in Missoula, and doing some work with students here teaching, and we're going to be going back to Carnegie and doing some seminars, and probably also maybe Louisiana. Joe's going to design a play for the University of Louisiana, and so he's going to be down there in February some. We're trying to figure out if the idea of going to the desert, which is appealing, where we have a place to escape to in the cold, harsh winter of Montana, is really such a good idea, because we like being here and we like everybody we're meeting, and there's so many things to do in Missoula, it's overwhelming, and I don't want to miss anything.
Thank you.
Sadly, that's all we have time for today. I was about to say let's give it up for Joe and John, but you just did. Give it up again. All right. Thank you, guys. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, especially the University of Montana, First Security Bank, and Blackfoot Communications. And of course, thank you to you, our audience. We couldn't do this without you. And finally, since I have everyone's attention for a little while longer, I'd like to make a special announcement. For your information, for those of you who don't know, City Club Missoula is a nonprofit organization with a board of directors and bylaws and all the rest. Thanks to those bylaws, we're about to lose 2 long-serving board members, Heidi Starrett, who's right here, and Peggy Kerr, who has managed not to make the last few forums. Peggy and Heidi are, they've provided countless hours to this organization to make it the success that it is, and you will not meet nicer, kinder, more giving people, and we will definitely miss them. So please join me in giving those 2 a hand. And also, sadly, this is my last forum as City Club Missoula's Board of Directors, the Chair of Board of Directors. It's been a great opportunity, and I thank everyone for putting up with me. Next month, our forum will be on how the recession and the general state of the economy is affecting Missoula, and at that time, I'll introduce our new chair, so I'll leave that just hanging in suspense. But please check our website, Facebook page for more information on next month's forum. It'll be January 9th, the second Monday, and that should do it for today. Thank you very much.